Good evening, and welcome to another live stream midweek study brought to you by Bradford Christian College. Please contact Bradford Christian College, bradfordchristiancollege.com to find out more information about what they have to offer. Check out their website, a link in the description below, and see if it's not maybe a good option for you or someone you know might benefit from it as well. Um, all right, so this is, I think, episode 8 of our midweek study. We're, I don't know, 3 or 4 episodes into our tradition of election sermons. We uh, looked at this sermon first. This is the 1756 sermon. Sorry for doing a lot of scrolling there. I didn't bring it up at the conclusion like I wanted to here. Um, but yeah, this was the sermon we looked at first by Reverend Samuel Cooper in 1756. Um, this was an election sermon given near the beginning of the French and Indian War when the colonies um, fought on the side of the king. And here's that conclusion that I want us to keep in mind. Let me just read that conclusion here. The faith of Moses will point us to a better country. It will guide us to the only society where perfect devotion, benevolence, and happiness are found. To the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to the spirit of just men made perfect, to an innumerable company of angels, to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and to God, the judge of all, to whom be dominion and glory forever. Right? So that was the conclusion to that 1756 sermon. And we want to keep that in mind because we are working through a sermon by the same minister, 1780, and this is now um, after the colonies have declared themselves to be free and independent states. And this particular sermon is election sermon is given at the installation of the new government of Massachusetts under their new constitution, state constitution. But what Samuel Cooper has to say is certainly applicable to Massachusetts itself, but it's also applicable to all the states that have joined United. Okay, now at this point, if memory serves, uh, see the where like, sorry, the war for independence is still underway. Um, I think the treaty ending the war is signed in 1783, although for all practical purposes, the war ended in 1781. All right, now I think we're at the last paragraph that we looked at, and let me just start here, and I think this has in it something of particular importance. In fact, let me just start at this paragraph. Um, at this point, Samuel Cooper is reflecting on how it has come to be that the colonies, now free and independent states, have realized their independence. And he says, upon our present independence, sweet and valuable as the blessing is, we may read the inscription, I am found of them that sought me not. Be it to our praise or blame, we cannot deny that when we were searching for it, it happily found us. Okay, this was as I remember it from last week, and we'll try to reconfirm that here. This was a paragraph that revealed much to us about the mindset of the colonies at the time of independence. All right, because he's suggesting that the colonists were not seeking independence. And I think that history would bear him out in this, that the colonists were seeking to have their rights as men, as Englishmen, and as Christians recognized, acknowledged. Let's read on here. It certainly must have been not only innocent, but laudable and manly to have desired it even before we felt the absolute necessity of it. Even before we felt the absolute necessity of it. It was our birthright. We ought to have valued it highly and never have received a mess of pottage. That's my Jacob and Esau comment over here, that this is what he's likening it to. A small temporary supply is an equivalent for it, going upon the trite metaphor of a mother country, which has so often been weakly urged against us. Like a child grown to maturity, we had a right to distinct settlement in the world and to the fruits of our own industry. Okay, this is a huge element in the thinking of the colonists. As things had progressed, say from 1756 on, the colonists saw themselves losing the right to the fruits of their own industry. It would have been just but justice and no great generosity in her who so much boasted her maternal tenderness to us, had she not only readily acquiesced, but even aided us in this settlement. In other words, he's saying, fine, let's go with the idea that Great Britain's the mother country, right? So here we are, we're growing to maturity, the colonists, right? Um, we're growing to that level of maturity that says we have a distinct settlement in the world. We're growing to that level of maturity that we have earned the right, we've realized the right to the fruits of our own industry. And he's suggesting this for the colonists to enjoy the fruits of their own industry is not some generous act on the part of the mother country. It's just a just thing to do. And in fact, if the mother country, Great Britain, was the kind of mother she boasted of being, she would have readily acquiesced. She would have been pleased to see her child have come to this point of maturity and in fact, assisted her child in realizing this position, this distinct settlement in the world, and enjoying the fruits of her own industry. It is certain, however, okay, um, I think I need a new color here. I guess this yellow will work. Um, it is certain, however, that we did not seek an independence. Okay, he can't state it any more plainly, right? His assertion is in this sermon, we, the colonists, did not seek an independence. It is equally certain that Britain, though she meant to oppose it, independence, with all her power, has by a strange infatuation taken the most direct and perhaps the only methods that could have established it, independence. Her oppressions, her unrelenting cruelty have driven us out from the family of which we were once a part. This has opened our eyes to discern the inestimable blessing of a separation from her. while like children that have been inhumanly treated and cast out by their parents, and at the same time are capable of taking care of themselves, we have found friendship and respect from the world and have formed new, advantageous, and honorable connections. Okay, and so it seems clear here that Cooper is suggesting that the more um, Great Britain tried to assert that the colonies were her child, the more it revealed to the colonies their true state of having grown to a position of deserving of independence, and the true um, perception of the mother country as a parent who's inhumanly treating its child. And so now, this independence that the colonies did not seek, but found them, he says, independence gives us a rank among the nations of the earth, which no precept of our religion forbids us to understand and feel, and which we should be ambitious to support in the most reputable manner. There, I did it. Um, Very interesting that in addressing the political governmental situation of this nation, this union of states, he emphasizes this, which no precept of our religion forbids us to understand and feel. Our religion. I wonder what that means. What is he saying? Our religion. Well, the our would be the free and independent states, broadly speaking. Sorry, my writing is not working well there. The free and independent states. Our religion. What does that mean? The religion of those free and independent states. What do you? It can only mean one thing in the reading of history. It can only mean one thing and one thing alone. And that's Christianity. That's the only thing that he can mean here. That's their religion. Collectively, that's their religion. That is the religion upon which they rely for their um, basis, their foundation of truth. Oh, yeah, Christianity didn't have any part to play in the founding of this country, really? And yet there it is, Christianity serving as the basis upon which they evaluate what are we supposed to think about this independence that has come upon us, that has found us? Are we to, is that something we shouldn't indulge in? Is that something that we can? What does our religion tell us? Well, it doesn't forbid them to understand and feel. It opens to us a free communication with all the world, not only for the improvement of commerce, the acquisition of wealth, but also for the cultivation of the most useful knowledge. What is this it? Aren't we still talking about independence? It naturally unfetters and expands the human mind, prepares it for the impression of the most exalted virtues. as well as the reception of the most important science. All right. The most exalted virtues, the most important science. Okay, what's happening here? Let's try that again. Most exalted virtues, the most important science. Sorry, I'm asking the interwebs a question. Um, okay, so let me look at my Webster's 1828 here just as a way to start. Let's go virtue. Virtue, strength, that substance or quality of physical bodies by which they act and produce effects on other bodies. In this literal and proper sense, we speak of the virtue or virtues of plants in medicine and so on. Bravery, valor. Definition number 3 in Webster's 1828. Moral goodness. I think this would be the definition that would apply here. Moral goodness, the practice of moral duties and the abstaining from vice, or a conformity of life and conversation to the moral law. In this sense, virtue may be, and in many instances must be, distinguished from religion. The practice of moral duties merely from motives of convenience or from compulsion are from regard to reputation is virtue as distinct from religion. The practice of moral duties from sincere love to God and his laws is virtue and religion. So that's pretty interesting. Um, I think it's quite likely, very possible that maybe even at the colonial period, headed into the period of independence, um, it may be true that maybe most people living in those now free and independent states were not Christian. But what is clearly true is that the mixture of virtue and religion together was influential, so influential that even those who were not Christian were still desirous of practicing virtue. This is fascinating to think about. Um, because one thing that is clear, one thing that is clear is that at the time of the founding of this country, there was great interest in a virtuous country. But there was recognition, just as Webster has defined here, there was recognition that certainly there's this effort at virtue, right? Practicing moral duties because it's convenience, out of compulsion, to maintain reputation. But of course, the best is virtue and religion together, the practice of moral duties from sincere love to God and his laws. George Washington said it this way: of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality, virtue, are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness. There's that word happiness again, we've talked about several times. These firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them, that is, religion and morality. A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity. So a volume or a book. Um, he goes on, let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle. It is substantially true that virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government. The rule indeed extends with more or less force to every species of free government. And so what George Washington is saying is that, do you want a free and good government? Then you must have virtue or morality. It must spring forth from virtue or morality. If it springs forth from things other than virtue or morality, it's not going to happen. And what you must have in place, if you expect to have this level of national virtue or national morality that supports a free, exercising, properly exercised government, you must have religious principles. Now, Cooper is saying that the way that you get there, um, in a culture, in a community, in a society, in a state, the way that you get to the point where virtue, um, morality has an opportunity to be expressed into the shape, form, and function of government is independence. Because independence is the thing that unfetters and expands the human mind and prepares it to be impressed by the most exalted virtues, to pursue those things, and the reception of the most important science. Okay, so let's think about this. What When he says the most important science, what in the world could he be talking about? Um, let's see. So Webster's 1828 in defining science, his first definition says this: in a general sense, knowledge or certain knowledge, the comprehension or understanding of truth or facts by the mind. And then he gives this important sentence: the science of God must be perfect, must be complete. The science of God, theology, the science of God. Now, historically, this predates founding father era by 700 years, maybe. But historically, the Christianity or theology has been known as the queen of the sciences. In fact, it was said that theology was seen as the highest science because its subject matter was the highest possible object of study, God Himself. All other disciplines are valuable as they serve or lead up to theology. Now, obviously, this is not the case today. Scientists, they think they are God. They're not. And in fact, the more and the longer they have thought themselves to be like God, the less helpful they've become, they being scientists. But the right and best conclusions that come out of science are reserved for the times that science and scientists humble themselves and submit themselves to the sovereignty of God and recognize that their only value is when they examine nature, creation, and such, and they bring forth conclusions that are consistent with God's character. And so, what's the most important science? Oh, I thought I was writing. What's the most important science? Theology, queen of the sciences. Where do the most exalted virtues come from? You could say theology, Christianity. I mean, look, come on. Do you see that uh, down to the most careful thinking of establishing this nation, theology, Christianity was involved? Let's read on. If we look into the history and character of nations, we shall find those that have been for a long time and to any considerable degree dependent upon others, limited and cramped in their improvements, corrupted by the court and stained with the vices of the ruling state, and debased by an air of servility and depression marking their productions and manners. Servility is not only dishonorable to human nature, but commonly accompanied with the meanest vices such as adulation, deceit, falsehood, treachery, cruelty, and the basest methods of supporting and procuring the favor of the power upon which it depends. All right, so I think there'd be a lot that we could maybe consider there, but let's move on. We're still on page 7. We're trying to get to page 19, so let's continue. In fact, apparently, I'm right in line with what Reverend Cooper was thinking at this point. Neither does time allow nor circumstance require that I should enter into a detail of all the principles and arguments upon which the right of our present establishment is grounded. Upon which the right of our present establishment is grounded. What is that present establishment? Free and independent states, right? They are known to all the world. They are to be found in the immortal writings of Sidney, Locke, and other glorious defenders of the liberties of human nature. They are also to be found not dishonored in the acts and publications of America on this great occasion, which have the approbation and applause of the wise and impartial among mankind, and even in Britain itself. Okay? So whatever acts, whatever publications he might be referring to, I don't know. And this the causes and necessity of taking up arms, the Olive Branch petition, the unanimous declaration, common sense, whatever they be. Reverend Cooper is saying those things are recognized, those documents are recognized as just as sure arguments for the rightness of their position as a free and independent state as the great writings of Sidney and Locke and other glorious defenders. They are the principles upon which her own government, referring to Britain, and her own revolution under William III were founded, principles which brutal force may oppose, but which reason and scripture will forever sanctify. Look at that. Here he's wanting to establish the sure foundation, the validity of their position. How can I convince you of the validity of our position, the principles upon which our government is based? Please look at Scripture. The citizens of these states haven't had sense enough to comprehend the full force of these principles, and virtue enough in the face of uncommon dangers to act upon so just, so broad, and stable a foundation. The citizens had virtue enough to act. Okay, I don't know how guilty that we all may be. Maybe I'm bringing up something that's not true. I don't know. My guess is if you found people today who believed they understood virtue, they would probably attribute to virtue a sense of avoiding conflict, right? Not entering into battle or fighting, right? They would think of virtue as being a peaceful thing, seeking peace above all things, peace in terms of quietness, right? Peace in terms of absence of struggle. But that's not what Reverend Cooper thought about virtue. What he understood about virtue is that when uh, when virtue faces a brutal force that opposes it, that represents an uncommon danger, virtue is willing to act. To take up arms. It has been said that every nation is free that deserves to be so. This may be always true, but had a people so illuminated as the inhabitants of these states, so nurtured by their ancestors in the love of freedom, a people to whom divine providence was pleased to present so fair an opportunity of asserting their natural right as an independent nation, and who were even compelled by the arms of their enemies to take sanctuary in the temple of liberty, had such a people been disobedient to the heavenly call and refused to enter, who could have asserted their title to the glorious wreaths and peculiar blessings that are nowhere bestowed but in that hallowed place? And he's saying that in not perilous times, virtue enough needs to be cultivated so that in perilous times that those people may act on that virtue. Right? In those times when divine providence presents an opportunity of asserting their natural right as an independent nation, There needs to be virtue enough in those people to act, even if compelled to act in a way that's necessitated by the arms of their enemies. Because at that point, those people would be obedient to the heavenly call, not disobedient to the heavenly call. Okay. Now, people today can play games and say, well, yeah, see, it's just a providence. It's really just some kind of, you know, impersonal thing. Impersonal things don't call people to action. Okay. Impersonal powers don't become directly involved in the personal affairs of men. Okay. So, you know, you can decide that, well, Christianity had nothing to do with the founding of this country. And then when you read these clear statements of the impact of Christianity, the Christian faith, and the Christian God at this time, and you can explain it away just to justify your precondition. Or you could come to a paragraph like this, and you could say, as best as I can, I'm going to have no assumption, Christianity or not Christianity, and you can read that paragraph. And if you do that and you read that paragraph, you must conclude that these were Christian people. They were looking for the Christian God to influence and call them to their Christian act. Let's continue on. It is to the dishonor of human nature that liberty, wherever it has been planted and flourished, has commonly required to be watered with blood. Britain, in her conduct towards these states, has given a fresh proof of the truth of this observation. She's attempted to destroy by her arms in America what she professes to defend by those very arms on her own soil. So what's the Revolutionary War all about? That war for independence. What was it really about? Well, here's one summary. Britain attempted to destroy by arms in America what Britain professed to defend by those same arms on her own soil. I don't know, it kind of makes me think of the whole rules for thee, but not for me kind of thing, right? Such is the nature of man, such the tendency of power in a nation as well as a single person. It makes a perpetual effort to enlarge itself and presses against the bonds that confine it. It loses by degrees all the idea of right but its own. We're talking about power, whether a nation or a single person. It makes a perpetual effort to enlarge itself, presses against the bounds that confine it. It loses by degrees all idea of right but its own. And therefore, the people must be unhappy indeed, who have nothing but humble petitions and remonstrances, and the feeble voice of a charter to oppose to the arms of another nation that claims a right to bind them in all cases whatsoever. Okay, now that's all in caps there. That a right to bind them in all cases whatsoever. That comes from when uh, Parliament decided to remove the stamp tax, I think it was. But in their proclamation removing that tax, they made this statement. Now, just because we're removing this tax does not mean that we don't have the right to bind you in all cases whatsoever. Okay. In In other words, they were saying, oh, while we're giving up this particular tax, we reserve the right to tax you at any time for any reason whatsoever. And the colonists saw through that. They saw that, okay, you're not understanding our petition. You're being manipulative, you're playing at it, you're trying to um, preserve your power. In a sense, actually, they were extending their power, right? Because they weren't limiting their saying, they weren't limiting themselves to a particular tax. While taking away a particular tax, they were asserting to themselves every possible tax you could think of. And so Cooper refers to the humble petitions and remonstrances and the feeble voice of a charter. Um, that's what they had become. That's what those things had become in the face of this onslaught from Great Britain against the colonists, right? And this becomes why the only thing that's left to them is taking up arms to defend themselves. It's the only thing that's left. Otherwise, they are subject to Great Britain in a position of absolute servility, perpetual servility. I think here he's going to get historical for a moment. Let's see what he says here. Poor Genoa, says an author who exposes with great energy and spirit the idea of receiving as the gift of a despot by a written charter a title to the rights of human nature, and to which all men are born. Poor Genoa, wherefore shouldst thou be vain of exhibiting a charter of privileges given thee by one Berenger? Concessions of privileges are but titles of servitude. Concessions of privileges are but titles of servitude. See, this is why it becomes really important in this day and age that those rights that are um, identified in the Bill of Rights be valued as actual rights, not concessions that can be played with by the government. Okay. The right to free speech, it's not a concession from the government. Because if it becomes a concession of the government, it's just a title of servitude. Look at England. What's happening? Any free speech there is a concession of privilege granted. And you see how that becomes a title of servitude for the people. Our Second Amendment, if that becomes something that can become a concession of privilege, it becomes a title of servitude to the people. Okay, now it gets better here. All right. His next sentence gets even better. Let me get a better color. I don't know, a different color here. The true charter of liberty is independency supported by force. Yes, this is powerful. Okay, make this your bumper sticker. Liberty is independency supported by force. That's what it is. He continues, it is with the point of the sword, the diplomas that ratify this natural right must be signed. It is with the point of the sword, the diplomas that ratify this natural right must be signed. What's he talking about here? Well, learn the history of Magna Carta. Okay. The Great Charter. 1215, I think. Runnymede, Prince John, the point of a sword, you will sign. Okay, now don't miss this either. Happy Switzerland. Not just because they have chocolate or the Matterhorn or ice cream. And no, why is it Happy Switzerland? To what placard owe you your liberty? To your courage, your firmness, your mountains. But hold, I am your emperor. We do not choose you should be any longer so. But your fathers were my father's slaves. It is for that reason their children will not be yours. But I have a right by dignity, and we have a right by nature. When did the 7 united provinces become possessed of this incontestable right? From the moment they united, and from that moment, Philip II became the rebel. Okay, so what is he talking about here? Well, you need to go learn the history of Switzerland. Uh, William Tell. But you see, they're happy Switzerland because legally they're happy because of their liberty. And what is liberty? It's that independence, right? It's independence supported by force. And what is independence? What did we learn back here? Independence. It's that condition which opens free communication, improvement of commerce, acquisition of wealth, cultivation of useful knowledge. Independence unfetters and expands the mind, prepares it for what? The impression of the most exalted virtues, the reception of the most important science. I mean, it's just like the goodness is like never ending. He goes on, heaven and earth can bear witness that these states are innocent of the blood that has been shed. Okay. Um, and the miseries diffused by this unrighteous war. That's an interesting perspective. Has that been part of your study of the history of this country? That those who fought for independence understood the unrighteousness of the war that was brought against them? Because they were in the defenders in this, that they were innocent of the blood that's been shed, that the miseries of this war are not their responsibility, because all they were left with was the necessity of taking up arms to defend themselves. We've stood upon the ground of justice, of honor and liberty, and acted merely a defensive part. Not unreasonable in our demands, not violent in our counsels, not precipitate in our conduct. Our moderation has been known to all men. And without refusing a single claim that Britain could in equity make upon us, our persons, our property, our rights have been invaded in every step that led to this revolution. I do not wish that this should be taken for granted barely upon our own declaration. Without appealing to foreign nations whose conduct towards us demonstrates what opinion they form of our principles and measures, we have an acknowledgement of the truth of this assertion from Britain herself, from men of approved wisdom, integrity, and candor, from some of the first characters and the brightest ornaments in her own government, from innumerable speeches in her parliaments, and from solemn protests in her House of Lords. So, I mean, this paragraph is huge. We would do well if every 4th of July we spent some time with that paragraph right there. Because he starts off by saying, we citizens of these free and independent states, we know for a certainty that we're innocent in this case. We're innocent in this war. Shed blood is not our responsibility. The miseries of it are not to be charged to our account, right? He's saying we as citizens, we stood upon justice, honor, and liberty. Our action has been the defensive action. And he goes on to say, but look, you don't have to take our word for it. Look at all the foreign nations and how they have responded to this. They know the righteousness of our cause. But you don't have to take the word of the foreign nations. Britain, look at your own people, your own men of wisdom, integrity, and candor, your own members of parliament, your own members of the House of Lords. And he's going to give some specifics here. Allow me to particularly to mention on this occasion the letters of Mr. Hartley, member of the British House of Commons for Hull, to his constituents, in which he gives a detail of the measures of that government respecting America, and upon which he says, thinking, as I have always thought, that the foundation and the prosecution of the war against America has been unjust, I have taken some pains to lay open those insidious arts which ministers have practiced, that I may contribute my feeble efforts to vindicate my country at large from so grievous a charge as that of supporting an unjust cause, knowing it to be unjust. In another place, he says, when all those transactions shall come hereafter to be revised in some cooler hour, I am confident there is not a man with a British heart who will not say that in the same circumstances he would have acted as the Americans have done. He, Mr. Hartley, goes on. What had the Americans to look to after the refusal of their last petition, but to seek for shelter in their own strength and independence? They were cut off from all possible communication with their sovereign and their mother country. And the first act of the second session of Parliament was to cast them out of all national and parliamentary protection, to fend 20,000 German mercenaries against them, to incite an insurrection of Negroes against their masters, and to let loose the Indian savages upon their innocent and unarmed back settlers, and upon defenseless women and children. I mean, do you see what's happening here? This is a British politician giving his own evaluation of what was happening. And he gives some particulars here that I'm guessing you never learned about what was going on at this time. Did you know about the 20,000 German mercenaries hired to come in and fight against the colonists? Did you know that there was this act to cast the colonies out of all national and parliamentary protection? What about these efforts to incite insurrection? What about taking measures to provide opportunities for the Indians to attack innocent and unarmed settlers and prey upon defenseless and women and children? And so while this is happening, or prior to getting to this point, the colonies, had petitioned and addressed, they had disclaimed every idea of independence. Remember, Cooper said, we weren't searching for independence. Independence found us. Here's confirmation. The colonies, had disclaimed every idea of independence, in return for which administration sends against them an army of 50,000 men. Now let ministers answer to God and their country for the blood which they have shed, the blood of thousands of their fellow creatures, willfully and premeditatedly shed in an unjust cause, will be required at their hands, who have taken their full stretch of vengeance in their attempts to destroy and to lay waste to the utmost of their malignant power the lives, liberty, property, and all the rights of mankind. I mean, this is full-throated uh, criticism of his own government by Mr. Hartley here. Cooper then editorializes here. Nothing can be more full to the point than this acknowledgment from a gentleman of such distinguished character. He imputes indeed the whole to the ministers, but as it was all adopted and authorized by the whole British government, it became an act of the nation in general. Though many worthy individuals with himself abhorred the injustice and cruelty. In the protest of the Lords against the prohibitory bill, the dissentient peers say, we are preparing the minds of the Americans for that independence we charge them with effecting, while we drive them to the necessity of it by repeated injuries. So remember what Cooper had said, that that thing that found us, which we as the colonists were not looking for, and which the mother country, Britain, professed to want to stop us from achieving, but ended up doing the very things necessary to bring us to that independence. It's the same thing is being said here. I rejoice that the Americans have resisted, said Lord Chatham in Parliament, a short but full testimony from that great man to the justice of our cause. I rejoice that the Americans have resisted. That considering that it came from someone as prominent as Lord Chatham, you would think that that would give them pause and they might rethink what they're doing. Didn't. Cooper goes on, thus are we acquitted from the guilt of all this blood that cries from the ground by the public declarations of many of the wisest and best men in Britain, men who perfectly knew all the measures of her government and all that could be offered to justify them, being themselves a part of this government, men deeply versed in natural and political law, capable of forming the truest judgment upon so important a matter or point, and who cannot be suspected of partiality in our favor. With all this justice on our side, we still put our cause to great hazard by delaying to declare ourselves a separate nation, even after Britain had, with her own hands, violently broken every bond of union. So you see how Cooper is saying that the point is forced upon us, right? Britain had done everything to violently break the bond of union between the colonies and the homeland, the motherland, right? Britain had set the colonies free and independent by their actions. And Cooper's saying, and if we don't declare ourselves a separate nation, we're at great hazard. We are um, floating among in the seas among the nations that can pounce upon us and take us. Okay. So that's the circumstance that leads to this Declaration of Independence. You could almost say a reluctant declaration of independence. You could say a necessary one, because if they if they don't take an action to establish themselves as a free nation, then they're just groups of people that are ripe to be swallowed up by whatever nations take the opportunity. By this conduct of our enemies, heaven has granted us an inestimable opportunity, and such has been rarely, if ever, indulged to so great a people. See, this is, he didn't use the word here, but this is his acknowledgement of providence, right? The hand of God that takes what seems to be bad, the conduct of our enemies, and brings forth beauty, an inestimable opportunity. What is that opportunity? An opportunity to avail ourselves of the wisdom and experience of all past ages, united with that of the present, of comparing what we have seen and felt ourselves with what we have known and read of others, and of choosing for ourselves, unencumbered with the pretensions of royal heirs or lordly peers, of feudal rights or ecclesiastical authority, that form of civil government which we judge most conducive to our own security and order, liberty, and there's that word again, happiness. I'm telling you, all these other words are great and they apply, but I'm telling you, for certainty, that as our forefathers are going through what they're going through, all of the turmoil prior to the war for independence, the war itself, and all of the struggles following the successful conclusion of the war, happiness is the thing that they're looking for, right? It's like that's what we want, is happiness. But they know that in order to get to happiness, you've got to establish security, order, and liberty. Those things have to be secured. And then there will be happiness. And I think I've talked about it in previous videos in the midweek study series. So go to Bradford Christian College uh, YouTube channel, click the playlist, find the midweek study playlist, listen to the previous videos. Understand the significance of happiness. Understand that significance. Let me just read this much of Webster's definition of the word happy so you understand ultimately what they were meaning by this. He only can be esteemed really and permanently happy who enjoys peace of mind in the favor of God. I have I have no doubt about this. The founding fathers were interested in setting up a scenario, a civil government, both state and federal, that secured security, order, and liberty precisely for the reason that they wanted the best opportunity for the citizens of the country, the citizens of each state, to find permanent happiness, to enjoy the peace of mind that comes knowing you're in the favor of God. And that's why it's a Christian nation. That's why. Okay, let's get through this paragraph here. An opportunity, though surrounded with the flames of war, of deliberating and deciding upon this most interesting of all human affairs with calmness and freedom. This, in all its circumstances, is a singular event. It is hard to tell where another such scene was ever beheld. The origin of most nations is covered with obscurity and veiled by fiction. The rise of our own is open as it is honorable. And the newborn state, may I not be allowed to say, is a spectacle to men and angels. For as piety, virtue, and morals are not a little interested in government, such a transaction has an aspect upon both worlds and concerns us not only as members of civil society upon earth, but as candidates for the city of the living God, the Jerusalem on high. Okay, right there. Right there is our first indication that Cooper is still holding the faith of Moses will point us to a better country. It will guide us to the only society where perfect devotion, benevolence, and happiness are found. To the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to the spirits of just men made perfect, to an innumerable company of angels, to Jesus, the mediator of the new covenant, and to God, the judge of all, to whom be dominion and glory forever. Okay, this theme that he concluded his 1756 sermon has just surfaced right here. "24 years later, very different circumstances, the theme lives on for Samuel Cooper. The theme of what we're involved in here is not just meant for the physical material world. It's all for the purpose of directing our attention to the city of the living God, the Jerusalem on high." See, that's what I mean when I say this was founded as a Christian nation. That's what I mean. Because as far as I know, the only religion that looks for the city of the living God, the Jerusalem on high, is Christianity. All right. We're going to end there tonight. Um, you can see that we have something exciting coming up because of that first word in the next paragraph. Happy. But we'll have to save that for, Lord willing, next week when we continue our midweek study and we continue this tradition of election sermons. We continue confirming the undeniable truth that this nation was founded smack dab in the middle of the Christian religion and the Christian faith, and because of that Christian faith, and for no other reason. And that's why we say it's a Christian nation. Hey, thanks for watching the video. Please like, subscribe, share. Maybe, as I've said here before, you don't have to share the whole video. I understand I've gone for over an hour here. You share a video with somebody that um, comes out and, oh, that's more than an hour. I don't have time for that. Fine. If there's something valuable, something helpful, something that relates to a conversation you've had with somebody in the past week, say it as the 28-minute mark. Share from that mark. Send them a text that says, hey, just watch 5 minutes from there. You'll get the answer to what you were asking about, or this will give you something new to think about, or hey, did you ever know this? Right? Just give them those snippets. That can be the motivation for somebody to say, hey, I want to know more about this. What they're talking about, what they're reading there, I've never known this before. I want to, and they'll come to the Bradford Christian College YouTube channel, they'll click on the playlist, they'll watch some videos, they'll listen to the videos. I think in what we do with our live streams each night is valuable information, quality stuff. It's not just the memes and the other funny videos or dog videos, which we can all enjoy, but it's something more than that. And so, yeah, please share, please comment, please visit bradfordchristiancollege.com and see if that's not an option for you. So God bless. Thanks for viewing this video, and join us again as we continue our midweek study.